afternoon on this Thursday, April 3rd. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's headlines. CMCS Lebanon, a project management consultancy, hosts a project management conference on bridging the talent gap at the Phoenicia International Hotel. The number of Syrian refugees registered in Lebanon surpasses 1 million after fleeing war in their country. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry exhorts leaders from both Israeli and Palestinian sides to lead and to do so immediately to prevent negotiations from collapsing. CMCS Lebanon, a project management consultancy in collaboration with the American University of Beirut, hosted a project management conference on bridging the talent gap at the Phoenicia Intercontinental Hotel. The conference included several guest speakers discussing solutions to assist organizations in bridging gaps. More in this.
One, business development entrepreneurship. The third one, risk management. And the fourth one is about PMO and program management. And we have in mind two other focuses, one for education and the other for health, that we are just working on right now, plus other things. So I think we can start. You heard about Jack Welch? GE, okay? We're gonna borrow a concept from Jack Welch and also borrow another concept from PMI. And using these two, we have a proposal for addressing the talent gap. Following, we're gonna speak about something which is called training needs assessment, and finally, we present some of the solutions. Now, the picture you see is one of our classes at AUB that we are very proud of, okay? We have some of the PMDs here with us, the cohorts 1, 2, and 3, and some of the new cohort 4 who have just started. We're going to address this in a while. So, to start with, a ability to perform or achieve something of value for your company or organization. You should have a specific skill or competency in order to perform. Capacity, more like the total capabilities that you might have within your company or organization. And talent management. Now the term PMI, actually we learned a lot about the term talent management from PMI. They use it all the time, specifically in the pulse of the profession. So what do they mean by talent management? Okay. First of all, every company or organization has objectives, and every company or organization wishes to achieve their objectives.
Parliament begins its final session of the week to discuss around 40 items remaining on its agenda after approving at least 30 items since lawmakers began meeting earlier this week. During the session, MP Ibrahim Kanaan asked MPs to pass a draft law to make civil defense volunteers full-time employees, as a group of them blocked a road in north of Lebanon in an attempt to pressure Parliament. Notable pieces of legislation that Parliament approved in the past 2 days include a law to change the status of around 1,800 Électricité du Liban contract workers to full-time employees, a domestic violence law, and a controversial rent law opposed by long-time tenants. Parliament Speaker Nabih Berri called for a 2-day legislative session next week to discuss pending draft laws. He stated that a bill to increase the salaries of public sector employees and teachers could also be on the agenda of next week's meeting if it was finalized by Parliament's joint committees set to meet tomorrow. Residents of two Tripoli neighborhoods of Beit Tiberi and Jabal al-Muhsin are celebrating as hundreds of Lebanese soldiers deploy in the most determined plan yet by the government to stabilize an area that for the past year has seen so many fatalities. Lebanese soldiers used bulldozers to scrap away sandbag fortifications used by gunmen, pushing aside dumpsters used as barricades. Residents spoke of arrest raids targeting wanted gunmen. The 3G cellular connection was also cut, preventing gunmen from using the WhatsApp messaging system. The security plan is an important test case for whether Lebanon can reverse its slide into the conflict. But the pause in fighting offers relief from flaring clashes that have killed over 200 people in the past 3 years alone. Many residents say they are enjoying the deployment as a respite from battles they consider pointless but fueled by Lebanon's persistent political instability. This was an exclusive to FutureTV. Lebanese soldiers have shot and killed a Syrian man and wounded 2 others after they allegedly failed to pay attention to orders to stop at a military checkpoint on the border with Syria. Soldiers manning a checkpoint in the area of Wadi Hamayid on the outskirts of the northeastern town of Al-Sail ordered the men on a motorcycle to stop, but they did not, prompting the military to open fire. Fatality is identified as Ziyad Al-Isa, and those wounded were Ayad Al-Samra and Ibrahim Hamad Hissian. They were taken to a hospital in Ras al-Balbak. The Lebanese army says in a statement soldiers shot at the men when they tried to escape and did not stop at the military checkpoint despite repeated warnings. The statement also adds that military police launched an investigation into the incident. Official numbers are out. According to the UN Refugee Agency, the number of Syrians registered as refugees in Lebanon after fleeing the war in their country has surpassed 1 million. Refugees from Syria, half of them now children, now equal a quarter of Lebanon's resident population, and most of them live in poverty and depend on aid for survival. The UN agency stated that Lebanon is now the country with the highest per capita concentration of refugees worldwide and is struggling to keep pace. According to the UNHCR chief Antonio Guterres, Lebanon has experienced serious economic shocks due to the conflict in Syria, while security has deteriorated as a result of rising regional instability. The UNHCR chief is urging the global community to boost its support for Lebanon. The number of school-aged children is now over 400,000, eclipsing the number of Lebanese children in public schools. These schools have opened their doors to over 100,000 refugees, yet the ability to accept more is severely limited. Syria's opposition is announcing that it will boycott the upcoming presidential elections in the wake of the government's announcement 1 day earlier that it is set for this June. The opposition's decision comes after the Syrian parliament ratified a law in March excluding all overseas Syrian opposition parties from the presidential election. Syria's main opposition, the National Coordinating Body, says at a press that they will not accept a presidential election under that law. In response, Syrian Minister of Information Omran Azzoubi stated that Syria's presidential election will not be hindered by the current security situation. He urged Syrian nationals to actively participate in the voting. UN Arab League Special Envoy to Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, is warning that the Syrian government's push for a presidential election could result in a failure of peace talks with the opposition. A pro-government Syria newspaper is accusing UN Arab League peace envoy Lakhdar Brahimi of encouraging what it calls terrorism and plotting the destruction and dismantling of the Middle East. The Watan newspaper also added that the constantly refusing to comment on foreign fighters whom he appeared to view as defenders of democracy and freedom of belief. This comes after Al-Watan reported that Brahimi intends to hold talks with U.S. and Russian officials in Geneva in mid-April to prepare for a new round of peace talks in Switzerland, but so far none of the parties have confirmed that. Coming up next, another gun shooting incident strikes Fort Hood. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Future TV. Frustrated by Israeli and Palestinian actions that have complicated his furious effort to salvage foundering peace talks, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has exhorted leaders on both sides to lead and to do so immediately to prevent negotiations from collapsing. In Algeria for strategic security talks after traveling to the Middle East twice in the past 10 days to rescue the peace process, Kerry said there are limits to what the Obama administration can do to push the parties together. Kerry has spent much of the last 2 weeks frantically trying to keep the peace talks from breaking down. He saw Netanyahu in Israel on Monday and Abbas last week in Jordan, but cancelled a return trip on Wednesday after the Palestinians said they would see greater United Nations recognition over Israeli objections.
Pleasure it is to finally be here in Algiers. We had this meeting scheduled months ago several times, and my hosts, the President, Flicka, and the Foreign Minister, have been so generous in postponing it because of difficulties we had. But it's finally here. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. We have very much a growing relationship with Algeria, important in security, growing there, important in commercial ties and in cultural ties. And I know that there's a great affinity here for people learning English. The appetite is endless, and there's much we can do. But we look forward to an important economic and security dialogue.
Russian troops deployed close to the Ukrainian border will return to base after completing their exercises, according to Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. He said President Vladimir Putin had given the same assurance to German Chancellor Angela Merkel when they last spoke on the phone. The Russian Defense Ministry on March 31st said that it was pulling back a battalion from the Rostov region and that the troops were returning to the Samara region, which is around 950 kilometers from the Ukrainian border. Lavrov stressed that Russia was free to deploy its troops within its own borders and said that Western partners recognize that in a legal sense there is no problem. The Russian Defense Ministry said that its troops have been deployed to carry out several rounds of training exercises in regions close to Ukraine. A U.S. soldier with mental health issues has shot dead 3 people and injured at least 16 on Wednesday before shooting himself at an Army base in Fort Hood, Texas, the site of another deadly rampage in 2009. The soldier, who was being treated for depression and anxiety, went to 2 buildings on the base and opened fire before he was confronted by military police. Fort Hood commanding officer Lieutenant General Mark Miley said. Security officials say preliminary information identified the gunman as Ivan Lopez, but Miley declined to identify the shooter, who is married, until his family was notified. The suspect's wife was cooperating with law enforcement officers, according to a Federal Bureau of Investigation official. The shooter has served for 4 months in Iraq in 2011 and was undergoing evaluation for post-traumatic stress disorder. He arrived in Fort Hood, one of the largest U.S. Army bases, in February from another military installation. Now from Barack Obama.
Vice Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Sandy Winnefeld, to get the latest report on the situation in Fort Hood. Obviously, we're following it closely. The situation is fluid right now, but my national security team is in close contact with not just the Defense Department, but the FBI. They are working with folks on the ground to determine exactly what happened, to make sure that everybody is secure. And I want to just assure all of us that we are going to get to the bottom of exactly what happened. Any shooting is troubling. Obviously, this reopens the pain of what happened at Fort Hood 5 years ago. We know these families. We know their incredible service to our country and the sacrifices that they make. Obviously, our thoughts and prayers are with the entire community, and we are going to do everything we can to make sure that the community at Fort Hood has what it needs to deal with the current situation, but also any potential aftermath. We're heartbroken that something like this might have happened again, and I don't want to comment on the facts until I know exactly what has happened, but for now I would just hope that everybody across the country is keeping the families and the community of Fort Hood in our thoughts and in our prayers.
Presidents and prime ministers from Europe and Africa have gathered in Brussels for a second and final day of EU-Africa talks designed to tackle the trade, the crisis in the Central African Republic, and climate change on the world's poorest continent. But cracks emerged even before the conference got underway, with some African leaders, including Zimbabwe's Robert Mugabe and South Africa's Jacob Zuma, deciding not to attend following a dispute over the invitation list. Arriving at the European Council, Chilean President Idriss Déby highlighted the environmental threats affecting African countries and urged governments to work towards seeking agreement at the next climate change summit set to take place in late 2015 in Paris. The fourth such meeting between EU and African leaders figures 65 heads of state and government and around 20 secretaries general, including United Nations head Ban Ki-moon, set to promote peace and investment. U.S. Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel hosted Asian defense ministers for the second day of informal talks in Honolulu, Hawaii. The group toured the USS Anchorage, where, while addressing the media, Hagel spoke briefly about his talks with his Malaysian counterpart, Hishamuddin Hussein, regarding the missing Malaysia Air Flight 370.
Laid out very clearly the challenges that he has faced, all of the ASEAN countries have faced, and other countries in Asia Pacific, as a result of this very mysterious flight. that all of the world is united in trying to assist and has been assisting. We certainly, the United States, have been, as well as all the countries, and complying with every request made by the Malaysian government. The minister did not ask me for any specific new items. Again, he can speak for himself on whatever he wants to talk about. I have told the Malaysian minister, again, as I have in the conversations we've had over the last 3 weeks, that his requests will be met if it's at all possible. And I think we've fulfilled every one of the requests that he has made. And we will continue to do everything that we need to do to assist the Malaysian people.
And on that note, we end our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of our top stories. CMCS Lebanon, a project management consultancy, hosts a project management conference on bridging talent gap at the Phoenicia Intercontinental Hotel. Number of Syrian refugees, it's official, surpasses 1 million in Lebanon. And U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry exhorts leaders from Israel and Palestine to lead and to do so immediately in order not to prevent collapsing peace talks. Those are your headlines live on Future Television in Beirut. I'm Yumna Nofa signing off for the week. Take care.
جيش لا توضع أمامه خطوط الحمر